I would encourage every single member of this committee to talk to lieutenants and captains and majors and colonels and sergeants and staff sergeants and sergeants major and specialists who are doing the job right now on the front lines or across the country, and they have seen a sea change in the environment and the morale and the spirit in their formations.
Hey again, everybody. It is 5 o'clock in New York, 2 o'clock in Los Angeles. I'm Jacob Soboroff in for Nicole Wallace. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth can tout his leadership all he wants. But according to new reporting from MS Now, the sea change those actually inside the ranks of the military are experiencing is not a positive one. This is a quote. Nearly 6 months into the United States war with Iran and a year into the Pentagon's decision to launch deadly strikes to kill alleged drug traffickers, the number of service members seeking a formal discharge from the military as conscientious objectors has skyrocketed, according to two groups that helped them file their applications. MS Now spoke to 5 troops who want out of the military because what they saw in recent months challenged their moral beliefs. The reasons they cited included being ordered to violate international law, seeing the civilian death toll as a result of American military interventions surge, and their concerns over extended deployments with no clear mission or strategy. The Defense Department did not reply to requests for comment, but those accounts add to the picture of what the New York Times reports as an army that has been left, quote, essentially rudderless, thanks to Pete Hegseth. From that Times report, it says this. The Army has not had a chief of staff, the service's top officer, since Mr. Hegseth fired General Randy George without explanation in April. And there are no signs that he is close to filling the position, said current and former officials speaking anonymously. Mr. Hegseth has forced out at least 3 senior officers who had been viewed as potential successors to General George. The turmoil comes as the Army, the military's largest service, faces its busiest period since the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Army air defense soldiers are playing the leading role in defending U.S. troops in the Middle East from increasingly sophisticated Iranian missile attacks. The Army's command in Europe is providing critical intelligence and other support to Ukraine as it fights to hold off a larger Russian force. And that is where we begin this hour with MS Now Pentagon reporter Priya Sridhar, who broke the story on those service members raising the flag that they are being asked to violate international law. Also with us, military analyst, retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. He served as the commanding general of the U.S. Army in Europe. And Paul Rieckhoff is here as well. He is the host of the Independent Americans podcast and the founder and CEO of Independent Veterans of America. Priya, this reporting is amazing. Tell us about the 5 service members that you spoke with and why they want out of the military.
Yeah, Jacob, this was so interesting, especially because Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth continuously tries to boast about his record number of recruits joining the military. Well, it looks like we're seeing a record number of service members trying to get out of the military as conscientious objectors. And as you mentioned, I spoke to 5 of them. One of the service members who was deployed to Operation Epic Fury, which, of course, is the war on Iran, told me that they believed that they were being ordered to target and bomb civilian infrastructure, which is of course, a violation of international humanitarian law, according to the Geneva Accords. And when this service member tried to raise those concerns with their chain of command, they were repeatedly told that these were dual-use pieces of infrastructure like bridges, which means they were used for both civilian purposes and military purposes. I also, by the way, Jacob, spoke to 2 service members who were deployed in support of Operation Southern Spear, which, as you remember, were those 60 boat strikes that occurred over the last year that killed about 210 people. Those boats were allegedly carrying narco-terrorists and drugs into the United States. And those 2 service members told me that they also believe that there wasn't enough justification or intelligence that the people on those boats were, in fact, narco-terrorists. And they were very concerned that they were potentially killing innocent civilians and perhaps fishermen. So the violation of international law, the surging of civilian death tolls, including that girls' school in Minab, Iran, where we know that 150 schoolgirls were killed, and just this overall feeling, as you mentioned, Jacob, which you and I have talked a lot about this, like those service members on the USS Abraham Lincoln who were seeing their deployments extended, no clear end goal in sight, no strategy. They echo those sentiments as well.
General Hertling, I wanted to this conversation makes me think of a conversation that I actually had with a friend of mine who's a Navy veteran and said that this person served in Operation Enduring Freedom, and this person and their colleagues believed in the mission that they were sent to carry out. And I think it's pretty simple. Those folks in the military want to feel like they're fighting for a reason, and it's a reason that they believe in, and they do not want to be told to break international law. Is that an oversimplification of what we're hearing in Priya's reporting there?
No, Jacob, not at all. That is spot on. And what I'll tell you is, reading Priya's piece and also the piece in the New York Times, there is so much under the wave tops on both of those articles, those great reportings by both of the people that did them. I'll do an anecdotal piece of evidence. During my 38 years serving in uniform, I had 2 individuals who submitted conscientious objector packets. They are very difficult to work through. These individuals have to talk to chaplains and lawyers and commanders and their chain of command. They have to provide proof in terms of letters. It is a difficult process to go through. So when you're talking about the uptick, as Priya reported, from 50 a year to 140 just since since the latest operation started, both in South America and also in Iran, it is gobsmacking to me. The other piece in the New York Times talks about the implications of moral injury, not only on the frontline troops, but even the ones that pull the trigger on long-range weapon systems, Patriot defense systems, the overworking of the air defenders. There is so much in those 2 articles that any military person could break down for you that is truthfully giving a very good state of our American military today. And there are concerns. I have concerns. I've talked to a lot of young officers, some NCOs, and a few senior officers, and they are all expressing the same things. And it goes back to one specific thing: a lack of communication between soldiers and their leaders, sailors and their leaders, the government and the citizens, and the government, the military, and the Congress. Those are the things that Clausewitz, an 18th century theoretician, said are required whenever you go to war: the support of the people, the leadership of the government, and the passion of the military. We're failing in all 3 of those areas right now in the conflicts we're executing.
And it's no wonder that the reporting that Priya has done over the course of the last several weeks about the mental health crises of the sailors and the airmen aboard the Lincoln has become part of the conversation around this. Paul, I want to read another interesting part of Priya's reporting about a person who runs a hotline help service to help members file as conscientious objectors. He said that unlike other times in American history when conscientious objectors were typically junior enlisted service members, many of his clients today have been in the military for more than a decade. They represent all enlisted and officer ranks up to major, and many have even attended service academies prior to their commissions. They've cited Operation Epic Fury and the attacks against drug traffickers in the southern sphere and the bombing of the Minab school in Iran in February as reasons for having a profound change in thought toward war. Well, your thoughts?
You know, I challenge maybe one central part of the piece when they say that the military is rudderless. It's actually not rudderless. There is a rudder, and it's the acting Secretary of Culture War, Pete Hegseth, who is driving that rudder through the military at whatever cost is necessary to execute what he and Trump want to execute in changing the military and eventually our entire culture. I've always said that Hegseth is the tip of the spear for the change they want in America and for the world. And you're seeing it at the military. And our troops have a conscience. They have character. They have ethics. And if you are black or a woman, or you don't like being on ships for 9 months, or you're against illegal wars, or you're against blowing people up for no reason, there's a lot of reasons to be uncomfortable and unhappy with this military and this leadership. But it starts at the top. And it starts with Hegseth, who has a total disregard for some of the most basic foundations of our military, to include the constant melding of our politics and our military. He's out stumping in Iowa for partisan political candidates while, you know, our troops are suffering on the USS Lincoln. So this is a strategy. It's not accidental. And I think Hegseth is on strategy. And imagine how much further he would be if he wasn't screwing up all the time. I mean, he's on plan. Yeah, exactly. He's doing exactly what Trump hired him to do, and what many of us warned he might do if he was confirmed.